podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts Radio Network, kingofpodcasts.com.
His TNA World Championship.
Thank you for joining us tonight at Rebellion.
Oh
my God! Trick Williams from NXT.
You saw Joe Hendry on Tuesday. He and Obafemi embarrassed Trick Williams. Well, what goes around apparently has come around for the TNA World Champion.
Woo! Hey, this is the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And believe it or not, whether you like it or don't like it, learn to love it. Because you have to listen to Wrestling is Real. It is the best thing going today. Woo!
The worldwide leader of podcasting excellence. The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents The Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us.
It's time for me to go ahead and recap TNA Rebellion 2025 here on the Wrestling is Real podcast. King of Podcasts here with you. And this is significant because tonight, as I record, we had a couple of things that happened notably on the Rebellion pay-per-view that happened on the campus of USC, Southern California, Los Angeles. Had a good crowd out tonight. Looked pretty good. There was a lot of conflicting reports about how sold out the crowd was, but nevertheless, had a good crowd. Looked good on TV. And of the card, about half the card I was actually kind of interested in. The other part just kind of felt a bit filler. And there were matches just for matches because there were a lot of multi-person matches that had nothing on the line, no stipulations, nothing at all. And the booking tells me everything. So you might remember that back in January, we talked about on this program that TNA and WWE had officially announced another multi-year partnership aimed at creating unprecedented crossover opportunities within TNA and WWE programming for NXT and TNA stars. So we know TNA and NXT have been working together in a lockstep. We also know that with TNA, they've been getting the other end of the stick, the wrong end of the stick. So let's culminate with what happened. We had Joe Hendry appear against Randy Orton in an open challenge, only to be taken down in 3 minutes, squashed, basically. Joe Hendry, to his credit, very ambassadorial, quite respectful, said, hey, you know, me and Randy, we got along pretty well. We clicked. So they probably don't even talk before the match. Just kind of set things up. Joe Hendry does get the win tonight and retains the World Heavyweight title at Rebellion, only to have Trick Williams come out and attack him right in the middle of his celebration. So they want to set that up. There was a storyline that was set up in NXT where, as Matthew Raywall just said, Trick Williams, Obafemi, and Joe Hendry were against each other. And now the infiltration of Joe Hendry coming over to NXT to be noticed, they now bring Trick Williams in to Rebellion, and a former NXT champion now will be feuding against Joe Hendry. And this Thursday is a live edition of TNA because they're setting up the tapings, and they are doing the old school thing they used to do where they used to have tapings after a pay-per-view, and then the first set of the tapings are live, and everything else is taped after that. So the system's always been played like that, but like, yes, their system. But now the booking of what they're doing is very clear. Tommy Dreamer and whoever else is back there in TNA ever since Scott D'Amore was ousted last year. We know there was the infiltration of the lineup of TNA with another company. We did that before. But there is a bit of a difference of what we had from previous years. So if I want to just go back to before all this, right? Let's just go and go back to see, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago that we had Kenny Omega being part of everything that was going on with Impact Wrestling at the time. 2021. So that time, again, that was also when we were still under COVID, and everything was set in place. But at that time, I just want to give the comparison 4 years ago when there was a relationship with AEW compared to what the NXT is right now with TNA. Let's just make the differences right here. Okay. Of the matches we had with AEW involved, Kenny Omega was their world champion at the time. And he was also AEW world champion. And that night, there was a winner-take-all match with Kenny Omega taking on Rich Swann. But other than that, if you look at what they had at the rest of the card, there was one particular champion that was in the company right there and taking on all comers. But we didn't get this over-infiltration of stars coming in from AEW just to infiltrate into TNA and just take over the entire thing. Yes, that particular part of the roster at that time was a big deal because at the moment, TNA was kind of struggling with having a world heavyweight champion at that time because of who they had in between. And if we want to look back in 2020 into 2021, there was quite a bit of issues right there of what was going on with TNA because of the star power they had available after coming out of COVID. So in the situation, AEW and TNA helped each other out during COVID. That's what really was clear of that. Rich Swann had been World Heavyweight Champion at Bound for Glory 2020. And then Kenny Omega wins the belt, holds the belt for 110 days, the Impact World title, only to lose it to Christian Cage, but then he retires the belt. And then Josh Alexander goes plan option C to vacate the X Division title and go after the World Heavyweight title. But then only for Moose to go ahead and take it back. And then it was Moose, Josh Alexander, and we had, there was a point where the champion that they had that the company wanted to really go and put themselves behind, they had such short title reigns before COVID. That was the part you had to remember. Because the longest reigning champion prior to that, as World Heavyweight Champion at Impact Wrestling, was Tessa Blanchard before COVID. And then everything happened to her. That was where everything was going on, where she had missed tapings and had to go and vacate the belt. So all that was going on. But she was, before all that, that's where they were. Now, current day, let's go now to Joe Henry. Prior to this, under Scott D'Amore, they had quite a few long reigning champions. You had Alex Shelley that held it for 218 days. Moose for 189 days. A good chunk of 2024. Then Nick Nemeth, who comes in 183 days. And they're all winning at major pay-per-views, right? So that was a change of TNA since. And remember, Scott D'Amore has not been part of this. So under the Tommy Dreamer regime, and without Scott D'Amore having any influence at all, changes were made. Now, Alex Shelley was champion at that point, like I said before, but then Moose, Nick Nemeth, and Joe Henry, since TNA has changed its name. And now we're at the point where, and remember, you had a lot of other stars that were former champions that were also involved, so they have quite a main event mix for themselves. But now, since TNA has quite a bit of a roster, and they have quite a bit of stars to work off of, that could constantly be put into the mix of title matches. I mean, look, even tonight, same thing goes. Joe Henry going into constant things when it comes to winning the belt. And coming in to Genesis and becoming World Heavyweight Champion on that pay-per-view, remember. He beat Nick Nemeth by pinfall. And then tonight, he goes into a match where it's a triple threat. Joe Henry, Frankie Kazarian, Ethan Page. Now, even in the match of this TNA triple threat match for the TNA World title, Ethan Page is put in. But here's what they go ahead and do now. Okay, fine. So in the match, they did have Joe Henry pin Ethan Page. Ethan Page has already been there before, not prone to taking a loss in TNA, because remember, that's how he was when he was on the way out. When he left the North, he was split off, and then he went over to AEW, which was a malign run, wasn't great over there, and then he goes back to TNA only because of his affiliation to NXT. So he has to, their NXT star has to be embedded into that match tonight. And then if you look tonight as well, the TNA Knockouts tag team match, you had to have two champions, two tag teams of NXT put in there as well. Jakara Jackson, Lash Legend, Gigi Dolin, Tatum Paxley, a Fatal Influence, had to be included into the match. Now, you still had Ash and Heather by Elegance still won the match and all that plunder, regardless. But the thing is that it was quite a bit of NXT talent infiltrated into the show. And I didn't know if that was necessarily what was necessary to build this show up and get the crowd that it had. Are you telling me that NXT benefited, TNA benefited from NXT being a part and building this crowd up that they had? Because it is quite a difference from what they had last pay-per-view, the last major pay-per-view, which was Genesis. Because remember, off of that, Moose Ace Austin, Eric Young, Steve Macklin, and the System in a tag team match. Spitfire and the By Elegance stars in the Knockouts tag team match at that point. Tessa Blanchard, Jordan Grace, and that was Jordan Grace on the way out. Mike Santana, Josh Alexander, Hardys, and Rascals. Rascals somewhat attached still to NXT a little bit in there, but then again, Masha Slamovich, Rosemary, Joe Henry, Nick Nemeth, all TNA. And this pay-per-view, tonight's pay-per-view of Rebellion, made all the difference. Like, you could just see there's a whole lot more infiltration. NXT now is fully embedded into this. Because then you also had, Fatal Influences, they were in the 6-woman tag team match earlier in the night. And I forget the other team, the name, Gigi Dolan, and Tatum Paxley. I forget if there's a name for them or not. I don't know. That's why I thought that. But the thing is that you have quite a bit of talent that came from NXT to be put into this. Rascals being a little bit of an affiliation, also into a 6-man tag team match. It's quite a bit that's being added in. And that's the part where, like, well, you can already tell that, you know, it's not even that NXT's really working in here to kind of work off of some relationship. And one of the other things that also concerns me tonight, why is it that Trick Williams doesn't get called to the team up to the main? Let me try this again. Why is it that Trick Williams is not being called to the main roster at this point after WrestleMania? You can't pull him up to the main roster yet. He's already been down in NXT, 2.5 years? He's been NXT champion. I think he's been North American champion. You've done everything that he did with Carmelo Hayes. Carmelo Hayes is still sitting on the main roster, floundering. But Trick Williams, who's had a lot of momentum, now you're going to put him in TNA. Somebody try to explain that to me. Why is he not going to that main roster? Don't tell me there's not a spot for him. And Obafemi, he's still sitting down here, and he's still sitting down in NXT. He's not being moved up either. I'm a little bit questioning about the call-ups that they have. I mean, it wasn't like they had any matches or any feuds that were like set in stone right now leading up to Backlash that wouldn't have allowed some fresh new talent. Now, of course, they did allow talent come in to Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown this past week. I mean, we did see Julia and Stephanie Vaquer and Roxanne Perez. So, like, Julia and Stephanie Vaquer have been there, less than 6 months? They've been thrown up to the main roster quickly. They decided to go that route. And there's still like some kind of like back and forth where they're still kind of like working in NXT while they're doing this. So it's like a hybrid almost. And I don't understand that part either. So like, there is no trust in NXT of the stars that they have to pull the trigger. They've done it with some of their stars. Last year they did. This year, not so much. They pulled the trigger on Carmelo Hayes, on Tiffany Stratton, on Braun Breaker a couple of years ago. And I'm just trying to figure out, there is no hierarchy. There is no pipeline. There is no system where you see the gradual movement up, the elevation of stars. It's never that. It's pretty clear that what they're doing right now with TNA, it's not where these NXT stars have been sitting around there in NXT for years when they were part of the Rainbow brand. They're not being moved up to the main roster. They're not being moved sideways. So it's as if that TNA is just another conduit, just another promotion for NXT stars to go over to. Are they really getting anything different over there? Because then for the other part of things that TNA has is I feel like there's not a lot of new stars they have coming in from the TNA side that are organic. A couple of stars, but not really that much. You see some stars that have been around. So Elijah gets a match. He's, former WWE guy, but now on a different name, but still the same gimmick as before, as Elias. Casey Navarro, who I just recognize now, joined into TNA, but I've known him best from being in MLW for all those years. Leon Slater, who that was somebody who was over in NXT before, and then he was let go and never got brought back after Triple H got back in the charge. Matt Cardona, who's been working everywhere. That guy is just like the independent of independents, and he is kicking ass wherever he wants to go. He works wherever he wants to go. El Hijo de Vikingo, which we know he'll somewhat work over to AAA, and we know that we're going to see him being embedded into the new AAA embedded WWE system, whatever they're going to be doing with that, which is going to already be NXT Mexico. And I would not be surprised. I will not be surprised if NXT Mexico becomes the name of AAA. They're not going to keep AAA. Because if they try to associate AAA with anything right now, it's not going to be a Mexican promotion. It's going to be a lucha promotion, or supposedly, with Mexican stars. But in WWE's eyes, they're not going to leave that name AAA. They're going to think it's that's the automobile club. No. We're going to change that name. And they're going to change the name. I wouldn't doubt it. I could see NXT Mexico. I could. Or NXT Lucha, whatever you want to do. It's going to be something else. But I also feel like when they do that, they're going to take the mystique away of that promotion. I mean, I heard Conan keeping it 100, and I heard his commentary when people were asking him feedback about what will happen to AAA now that WWE's in charge, what was his role going to be, all that. And yeah, I get it. It's like, he's happy. He's going to be working there right now. He'll be working creative. Who knows? He'll be working underneath somebody else. But according to Conan, there's going to be a lot more capital coming in and a lot more money to go and promote, a lot more money to go and put into the promotion itself. Because they were kind of working off of what, I don't know if it was shoestring or not, but they weren't really necessarily putting a whole lot of extra money or investing a whole lot of capital into the broadcast into North America or any English broadcast, because AAA wants to go and build themselves into the North American market and go farther up north, which I understand that. Take the Mexican model and see if they can move it up north, but now they're going to have a WWE. They're going to be infiltrated with it. When most likely WWE is going to go ahead and make changes to it, and some significant homogenized wholesale changes. Who knows who's going to be kept on that roster? But I'll tell you one thing: I know there's going to be a purge in that roster. You'll have some of the lucha stars that have been working in WWE that will be able to work on this other roster and work something off of that. It's like, what are we doing with all these extra organizations? You got Evolve that's been attached to it. You have this here, and then you have the ID program. It's like WWE has, again, continued to expand resources so that they have various promotions and things sideways to keep wrestlers busy. But that main roster is too sacred, and they are incapable of building new stars to go to that main roster. So that's why TNA now is becoming more of a haven for some of these stars in NXT that you want to just give them some different territory to work off of. But that's all it is. Now for TNA, hey, listen, they're going to sell out arenas. They're making money off of that part. They're not making money on any broadcast deal because Anthem and Access TV are one and the same. So like, there's nothing extra with that. I mean, they have made new deals in terms of their broadcasting. New England Sports Network now carries their show on Saturday afternoons. They have an expanded deal in Canada with Sportsnet, which is a better channel for them. So all those things are good. No more Fight Network to deal with. They got Sportsnet, which is the alternative to TSN. They're doing something there. And TNA now is just working its own where we don't see the ratings for them anymore. Like, ratings don't even matter. It's just kind of there. So it's more about what the pay-per-views are going to do and what their gates are going to be as they go out and about. And they're expanding their reach where they're not staying to certain spots anymore. They're not just staying in Ontario. They're not staying over in Chicago or New York or whatever it is. They want to go into some bigger venues, a little more lively, and they've been doing that for themselves. That's okay. I understand that part. But I look at what they did right here. All right. No world title changes except for the tag team titles. That's all they decided to go and change. So Moose retains in the Ultimate X match. Great match, by the way. It was really quite well laid out. Vikingo with a destroyer on the apron. Casey Navarro doing a big splash. Like, there was some moves out there. Moose being afraid of heights, and Alicia Edwards has to go out and assist Moose to get the X Division title, but he wins at the end of the day. Ace Austin and the Rascals against the System. I saw some of this. Sean Waltman came out with Ace Austin and the Rascals. They all did Bronco Busters. They all did the Suck It, whatever. The X Chops, whatever, man. I mean, the crowd was happy to go and see a little nostalgia. That's fine. Steve Macklin, Eric Young, and former digital social media channel, now the international title, doesn't mean much to anything. And Steve Macklin, the role they've given him after he was World Heavyweight Champion, I don't know what they've done with him, but now he's some brooding character, quiet. I don't know if it makes much of a difference. It's just here, people watch it. Mike Santana, Mustafa Ali, and these guys are not for any titles right now. Mustafa Ali was X Division champion. Mike Santana, these are two guys you could move up towards that world title level right now if you wanted to, but they're not. They're just kind of in the spot, but they've had their feud, and they had a Falls Count Anywhere match tonight to kind of squash it. Tessa Blanchard looking really good, getting back out there in the Knockouts World title picture against Masha Slimovic, but of course, because of the stigma, because of what she said, Tessa Blanchard will get to be in these matches, but she will not win. She's not going to be with Knockouts champion. I mean, they were, if there becomes any kind of press, the social media, like the juvenile delusional fandom, if they get their hands on the fact that Tessa Blanchard becomes a champion again, they're going to shit on it. So they won't do that. But they'll let her be in these matches. She looked really good out there. Great match with her, but that was it. Masha Slimovic continues to be Knockouts World Champion. And they've been setting things up with Nick and Ryan Nemeth. They had a thing with the Hardys. I saw some bits of the clip where the Hardy compound was used once again for the Nemeth brothers and Wisp of the Willow. Willow the Wisp was brought out again, and, all this kind of stuff they were doing. Anyways, how many more times do we have to go to the Hardy compound and go back to Final Deletion, go back to Deleter Decay, which those were great things. But too many times to the well on that segment. Too many times they've gone after it, but they did. But the important thing is that the Nemeth brothers are now champions. Tag team champions. That was the one title change we had the whole pay-per-view. And then Joe Henry here in this three-way match, only to be set up. And by the way, Kazarian did have his Call Your Shot Gauntlet championship title opportunity, which was why he was embedded into this match. And there's it. So we're going to probably Joe Henry and Trick Williams. We're going to probably tease that up for Slammiversary. Do I really want that match? No. And I'm wondering what happens now. How much more NXT infiltration will be coming onto this main roster? That's the other thing I want to be concerned about myself with, because there will be more of this. Again, they put a lot of women on this roster into these matches, and quite a few people compared to the first pay-per-view they had, because the partnership had just started up again. And I don't remember NXT and TNA getting that much into bed with each other. And when I do see some people, it's just one-offs. There's not much of a TNA influence. NXT's taking the bulk of this. And for whatever reason, TNA is willing just to go ahead and just be asking to be given the crumbs they're given. And the fact of the matter is that TNA is made to look inferior. I don't care what anybody else says. TNA's been made to look inferior. Look at how they did things where Joe Henry gets squashed by Randy Orton at WrestleMania. Why even have that happen to him? And then tonight, the heat gets taken off because now we see who might potentially be the champion come Slammiversary. Trick Williams will probably become TNA champion while being contracted under NXT or WWE, and that's it. But that's the decision we're going to go with instead. I don't know if I like that or not. It doesn't feel good to me at all. It's too much TNA being taken over by NXT. And this is not an NXT takeover. There's no pun right here. This is not where we're getting some kind of storyline where it's an NXT invasion. We're not getting anything like that. But for whatever reason, the fact that some of the NXT stars they decided to go and bring over here, they're going here. And for whatever reason, the stars are going to bring over to TNA have been all these stars that are kind of been around the NXT ranks for a long time, but they're the ones that came from the Bruce Pritchard, Vince McMahon era. I mean, yeah, we haven't seen Andre Chase yet. We haven't seen Ridge Holland yet. I mean, none of those type of stars, right? We haven't seen Duke Hudson over here yet. But who knows? And who knows if they don't decide to go and go that route with them anyway? Like, for NXT, they're happy to go and have the inclusion of Joe Henry because he's over. But they're not necessarily interested in some of the other TNA stars. Not necessarily. If they are, they're just taking them. That's why Jordan Grace moved over. They gave her a contract. But, like I said, you look at the stars they have now from within the NXT Rainbow time of 2023, 2022, changed up. Those are the stars they're choosing to go and bring over here. Meanwhile, it's almost as if NXT's moved on from them. So we got to give them some place to go, something to do, go over to TNA. And these NXT stars should consider the fact that, hey, you think you're getting a good service going to TNA now and working. I don't see it that way. For Trick Williams, for Jakara Jackson, Lash Legend, for Gigi Dolin, and for Trick Williams, if you're not moving on that main roster, you're getting sidetracked to TNA. You're going sideways in your career. Because the fact you're in TNA, I mean, I'm not telling you that like they're going to do anything different if they go to AEW or somewhere else. No. But it's as if they're just being thrown into a side division because they have to be put somewhere. But there's no faith in these stars to be main roster bound. They're not ready to go and pull the trigger on them. And this is the part where whoever's running creative in WWE right now, under Triple H, he's not willing to go ahead and take the risk and take a star that he believes, or that Shawn Michaels will put a lot of faith into, build up big in NXT, and then for the sake of, from NXT and as making a developmental territory, if they're doing great in developmental, call them up. They're not calling up stars anymore. They stopped doing that. If they're calling up stars, they're not developmental talent. Let's make that clear too. Because of the fact that you saw Roxanne Perez, who already had a pedigree before she came into this company, because she had all her work with Booker T's promotion and Ring of Honor before she made it up to this level in NXT. She's been held back in there in NXT. She's been champion, but she's been there for a long time as well. Overstayed her welcome. She should be on the main roster already. Should have already been. And then you have, again, tag team like a Jakara Jackson Lash Legend. They're not moving them up yet, but those stars have been down there in NXT for a long time. 3 years now? Trick Williams the same way. Why are they being held back? I just don't like the fact that TNA is being used as just this. WWE creative cannot and will not take the gamble on these stars to bring them up main roster because they don't have a plan for them. They don't have a plan for them. They don't think their gimmick is going to get over on that main roster. And when they fail, what happens after that? We've never heard from Kiana James ever again. What happened to her? Remember her? Never heard from her again. Some of those draft picks that they had that came from NXT and got called up, and nothing came of them. Nothing bore fruit at all. Which is why, at least when NXT was developmental, when it was being treated like developmental and not just another indie promotion, TNA's not any promotion. But NXT and WWE want to treat TNA like an indie promotion. They want to treat TNA like Evolve. Might be a talent exchange, but the talent exchange is benefiting NXT just to give these other stars someplace to go. Because while they're being pushed off to the side, NXT's working on other stars. They want to build themselves. So they're making room for new stars, but the purpose of the developmental territory, which it could still be, they're not using it as such because they don't want to call anybody up. Because they're afraid that if they take somebody and put them up there, they're going to fail. And Triple H and whoever else, they don't want to be the ones that say, hey, it's not going to work out. We have to go and release you. And God forbid that some of these stars they have over here that are being thrown into this TNA mix, if they didn't work out on the main roster, okay, say they put them up on that main roster and they fail. The biggest fear I think that WWE has right now is that because they're doing this sideways movement of talent exchange for these NXT stars that have been stalwarts down there in NXT at the Performance Center, if they show that their creative is inferior to building them and becoming big stars, and then they go somewhere else. Listen, if they go to AEW, if they go to TNA on their own, AEW and TNA are a little bit more privy on taking some stars that have had some of this WWE shine on them and were not done well. And there's been times where, especially TNA, have been pretty good at rehabilitating characters and giving them different gimmicks or something else that will help build them up and make them significant again. But it's clear that WWE cannot be the developmental system. They're not willing and they're not capable of developing new stars. But they're happy to go ahead and take stars from other organizations. Now they're willing to go ahead and buy other organizations just to get their talent. It's more than anything like that. AAA and eventually New Japan, if that deal's coming up to play, if that's going to be coming to pass, then WWE's just trying to make sure to go and corner the market just to go and take up territories so that some of these territories will bear some fruit on stars they can quickly turn around and maybe make them stars. Because they're obviously caring more about taking some stars and trying to build up with them right away. When it comes to getting Malachi Black back, now he's back as Aleister Black. Getting Rey Fenix and Penta over to Raw and making something out of them. But they're stars with all this pedigree, right? All this recognition that they have. Because they've been on American TV for a while. When it comes to Malachi Black as Aleister Black, we all know him. Rey and Phoenix, we've seen for years on TV. And now here we go here. Except for the fact you get Stephanie Vaquer and Julia, which now we're just getting WWE just taking up stars and acquiring stars just to make sure AEW doesn't get them. It's kind of like that. And it's like, all right, whatever. I just don't get the modus operandi right now. And I'm not going to get that. And this TNA relationship right now, it's not affecting TNA yet. But I feel like TNA's identity is definitely eroding in front of us. Whatever TNA was, whatever the Scott D'Amore had in mind, whatever is being done at all with matches in terms of just what the stars are going to be doing in the current roster of TNA, by Bound for Glory, I could see a definite sea change where more NXT stars are embedded into this. Some of these other NXT stars that, much like a Trick Williams, or much like a Ethan Page, or all these women that are out here with Gigi Dolin and Lash Legend and others, I could see more of this infiltration going on soon enough by Bound for Glory. Keep an eye on that because it could very much happen. And that's all I got to say about that. So thanks for listening to my post-show recap of Rebellion here on the Wrestling podcast, and we'll come back and we'll see what they're going to decide to go and do WWE in terms of what they have planned for Raw, SmackDown, and trying to go and build something off of WrestleMania. We know that John Cena and Randy Orton are now set for Backlash. It's going to be a one-off. Pretty sure of that. And John Cena's heel turn, man, he gets to be champion. Now he's being looked like a chump. I don't get all that either. Anyway, come back this week, this Wednesday, for another Wrestling podcast, because wrestling needs us.